They called her weak, a trophy wife with no backbone. For 5 years, billionaire Declan Westbrook paraded his mistress in front of her, dismissed her intelligence, and systematically broke her down. He even had a group chat called Project Replacement, where he and his executives laughed about how easy she was to manipulate. But Charlotte Brennan had a secret. While he was busy humiliating her, she was building an empire in the shadows. And at his victory party, in front of Silicon Valley's elite, she detonated a bomb that would destroy everything he'd built. This is the story of the ghost who learned to haunt back. If you love stories of brilliant revenge and women who refuse to stay broken, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling us, have you ever been underestimated? Let's begin. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But my mind was served at 98.6 degrees, human body temperature, because I wanted them to feel it like a heart attack. My name is Charlotte Brennan. 3 months ago, I walked into the Fairmont Grand Ballroom, wearing a dress the color of dried blood, and destroyed a billionaire in front of everyone who mattered. But that night was just the explosion. The fuse had been burning for 5 years. Let me take you back to where it really started. 3 months before the gala, before I knew what I was capable of, back when I still believed love could fix broken people. The Palo Alto penthouse where I lived with my husband Declan Westbrook was 7,200 square feet of architectural triumph and emotional wasteland. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Silicon Valley like a throne room surveying conquered territory. Every surface was glass, steel, or imported Italian marble. Cold, perfect, suffocating. I stood in front of the bedroom mirror that Tuesday morning, practicing my wife's smile, the one that said everything's fine when nothing was. Corners up, eyes soft, head tilted just slightly, approachable but not needy, present but not intrusive. Declan walked past me, adjusting his Tom Ford tie, eyes locked on his phone. He hadn't looked at me, really looked at me, in months. Investors' dinner tonight he said. Not a conversation, a command. Wear the Chanel, not the McQueen. You look like you're trying too hard in the McQueen. The sting was so familiar I barely felt it anymore. Like living in cold water. Eventually, you stop noticing you're freezing to death. The navy Chanel or the black, I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Does it matter? He was already walking away. Just don't embarrass me. The door closed behind him. His cologne lingered, expensive and impersonal. I looked at my reflection. When had I become this person? This careful, quiet ghost who measured her words and her wardrobe and her very existence by how little space she took up. I used to be Charlotte Brennan, rising star curator at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. I could talk for hours about postmodernist sculpture, about the intersection of art and technology, about the way light transforms meaning. I had opinions. I had fire. I had a self. Now I was Mrs. Declan Westbrook. And apparently, that was all I needed to be. That afternoon, I did what I'd been doing more often lately. I drove to SF MoMA alone, walked through galleries where I used to give tours, where my voice used to fill rooms with passion and knowledge. Now I was invisible, just another wealthy patron in expensive shoes. I stopped in front of a Sarah sculpture, running my fingers near the rusted steel without touching it. 5 years ago, I'd stood in this exact spot giving a tour to 20 art students. I could still remember their faces, hungry for knowledge, looking at me like I had answers that mattered. Did you know Charlotte Brennan used to work here? A voice said behind me. I turned. 2 young curators I didn't recognize, probably hired after I left. Really, the other one said. What happened to her? She became a Westbrook wife. The way she said it, like a diagnosis, like a death sentence. They walked away, not knowing I'd heard every word, not knowing that phrase, Westbrook wife, would echo in my head for hours, because that's exactly what I'd become. Not a person, a category, a role, a thing Declan Westbrook owned. The investors' dinner was at Atelier Cren, a 3-Michelin-star restaurant in San Francisco. I wore the black Chanel, applied makeup with steady hands even though my heart was hammering. Check my notes one more time. I'd researched everyone who would be there tonight. Read their company's annual reports. Studied their investment portfolios. Prepared intelligent questions about Nexus AI's new acquisition. about machine learning applications, about market positioning. Maybe tonight Declan would finally see me as more than decoration. Maybe tonight I could remind him who I used to be. I was so naive. The private dining room held 12 people, 11 men and me, and Sloan Harrington. Sloan was Nexus AI's chief marketing officer, 29, blonde, and sharp as a knife. She'd gone from Instagram influencer to corporate executive in 3 years through a combination of aggressive networking and strategic relationships, mostly the latter. She was also sleeping with my husband. Everyone knew. No one acknowledged it. Declan held court at the head of the table, expansive and confident. This was his element. He talked about disruption, innovation, synergy, all the words that sounded meaningful but said nothing. The investors leaned in, captivated. Sloan sat to his right, where I should have been. I was at the far end, next to an elderly venture capitalist who kept checking his phone. Halfway through the main course, there was a lull in conversation, an opening. The acquisition of Tech Vision makes strategic sense, I said, keeping my voice steady. Their natural language processing patents complement your existing machine learning infrastructure. But have you considered the cultural integration challenges? Tech Vision has a very different corporate philosophy. The table went quiet. Everyone looked at me like I'd started speaking ancient Greek. Declan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Sweetheart," he said, voice dripping with condescension. "We're talking about machine learning, not arranging flowers." The table erupted in polite laughter. My face burned. "I just meant Charlie studied art history," Declan told the investors, as if explaining a child's limitations. "She's wonderful at aesthetic decisions, color palettes, that sort of thing. But let's leave the complex business about this strategy to people who understand it." Sloan smirked into her wineglass. The elderly venture capitalist patted my hand like I was a confused puppy. I stopped existing after that, became a statue, smiled when expected, nodded at appropriate moments, died a little inside. I watched Declan's hand rest on the small of Sloan's back. Proprietary, intimate, a gesture everyone saw and no one mentioned. When Sloan excused herself to the restroom, I followed, not to confront her, just to escape. I stood in the marble bathroom, hands gripping the sink, trying to breathe through the humiliation. The door opened, Sloan's voice, talking on her phone. She hadn't seen me in the stall. "God, she's like a ghost," Sloan said. "Does she even have a personality? I honestly don't know what Declan ever saw in her." Well, besides the whole innocent intellectual thing, which I guess was novel for about 5 minutes, she laughed. Someone responded on the other end. "Trust me, it won't be long now. Project replacement is right on schedule." My blood turned to ice. Project replacement? Sloan left. I stood frozen, those words looping in my head. That night, after Declan came home late from supposedly working late, after he fell asleep without saying goodnight, I did something I'd never done before. I went into his home office. His tablet was on the desk, unlocked, careless, or maybe deliberate. Maybe he wanted me to know how powerless I was. I opened his messages, found a group chat labeled PR team, Declan, Sloan, and 3 other executives. I scrolled back through months of messages. My hands started shaking. They weren't just having an affair. They were systematically destroying me, isolating me from friends, spreading rumors about my mental instability, making sure I had no allies, no support system, nowhere to go. Declan's message from 2 weeks ago. "She's almost broken. Another month tops. Then we offer the settlement. 2 million and she signs away any claim to the company or assets. She'll be so desperate she'll take it." Sloan's response. "What if she fights Declan? She won't. Charlie doesn't fight. She folds. It's what she does." I read that chat for 2 hours. Every casual cruelty, every calculated move, every moment they laughed about how easy I was to manipulate. The man I'd married, the man I'd given up everything for, saw me as an obstacle to eliminate. Not even a person, just a problem requiring a solution. I thought about the sleeping pills in the bathroom, about how easy it would be to take too many, about how no one would probably even be surprised. Then I thought about my mother, about the woman who raised me alone, who worked double nursing shifts so I could go to Stanford, who taught me that Brennan women don't quit. I closed the tablet, walked to my closet, packed a bag, and I drove to Boston. My mother, Ruth Brennan, lived in a modest apartment in Brighton, the same place she'd moved to 30 years ago when my father left. The neighborhood had gentrified around her, coffee shops and yoga studios replacing bodegas and laundromats. But Ruth remained, steady, constant. I stood outside her door at 2 in the morning, exhausted and hollow, knocked. She opened the door in her bathrobe, eyes sharp with concern. Charlie Bear. Then her arms were around me, and I was crying for the first time in years. Ruth made tea the way she always did when the world was falling apart. Strong Irish breakfast with too much sugar. She sat across from me at her kitchen table, the same table where I'd done homework and learned to play cards, planned my entire future. "Tell me," she said simply. So I did. Everything. The humiliation, the affair, the group chat, project replacement, the slow erasure of Charlotte Brennan. Ruth listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Do you remember what I told you when Melissa Patterson made your life hell in 8th grade?" she finally asked. I smiled despite everything. "Never let them see you bleed." "No." Ruth's eyes were fierce. "I said don't bleed where they can see you. But Charlie always makes sure they bleed where everyone can see them." She stood, walked to an old filing cabinet in the corner, pulled out a folder thick with papers. "There's something I never told you," she said, "about why I stayed in nursing even after you graduated, about what happened 7 years ago." She handed me the folder. Bank statements, legal documents, letters from attorneys. St. Catherine's Hospital covered up a doctor's mistake, Ruth said, her voice steady but hard. Dr. Richard Morse came to work drunk, made an error during a routine surgery. The patient died. The family sued. Hospital paid them off. But I was the head nurse on duty that night. I knew what happened. I documented everything. I stared at the numbers. $2,700,000. They paid you to stay quiet. They paid me to not destroy them. Ruth sat back down. Blood money? Charlie? I never touched it. Felt wrong. Earning money from someone's death. But I kept it. Invested it carefully. Waited. Waited for what? She looked at me with the same expression she'd had when I was 16 and told her I wanted to go to Stanford even though we couldn't afford it. Fierce pride mixed with absolute certainty. "For the day you'd need it." I couldn't speak. Ruth reached across the table, gripping my hands. "Listen to me. That man, Declan Westbrook, he thinks you're nothing without him and he thinks you're weak. Let him think that. Let them all think that. But Charlie, you're Ruth Brennan's daughter. We don't fold. We strategize." The next morning I met Marcus Webb. He'd been Ruth's neighbor for 10 years before moving to Providence for work. 45, recovering gambling addict, forensic accountant who testified in 3 major fraud cases. He owed Ruth a life debt from the time she'd talked him down from a bridge. We met at a diner in Somerville. Marcus looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from fighting yourself every day, but his eyes were sharp. "Ruth called me," he said. "Told me you needed help taking down a billionaire." "Can it be done?" I asked. "With 2.7 million, Marcus smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Charlie, you'd be amazed what damage you can do with that kind of money if you're smart about it. Tell me everything about Declan's business." I did. Nexus AI was planning to acquire Veritech Industries, a data verification company. The acquisition was essential for their next product launch. Without Veritech's technology, Nexus's flagship product would be delayed by at least 2 years. "Who owns Veritech?" Marcus asked. "It's publicly traded, small cap. The founder, Gerald Marsh, still owns about 30% and controls the board. And Declan's planning a hostile takeover. He's been buying shares through shell companies for months, driving down the stock price with planted negative press. Classic corporate raider tactics." Marcus leaned back, eyes distant, calculating. If someone acquired enough shares before Declan completed his takeover, if that someone controlled the board, they could block the acquisition entirely. My heart started beating faster. How much would we need? 51% to control the board. But we'd need to move fast. If Declan suspects competition, he'll just offer more money. Can we stay anonymous? That's my specialty. Marcus pulled out a laptop. We set up multiple shell companies, buy in small blocks through different brokers, stay under the SEC reporting threshold. By the time anyone realizes what's happening, you control Veritech. And then Declan Westbrook learns what it feels like to lose everything he wants. Over the next week, I barely slept. Marcus set up 6 shell companies across 3 states. We studied Veritech's ownership structure, identified shareholders likely to sell, calculated exactly how much we could buy before triggering mandatory disclosure. But we needed inside help, someone who could make introductions, open doors in the tech world I'd left behind. I called Dr. Elena Cortez. Elena had been my mentor at SF MoMA, 10 years older than me, brilliant, passionate about contemporary art. She'd left the museum under a cloud 3 years ago after a painting she'd authenticated turned out to be a very good forgery. The scandal had destroyed her reputation. Charlie. She sounded surprised to hear from me. It's been years. I know. I'm sorry. I should have reached out after everything happened. You were busy becoming Mrs. Westbrook. No accusation in her voice. Just fact. Elena, I need help, and I think I can help you too. We met at a cafe in Oakland. Elena looked older, harder. Success and loss both leave marks. I told her what Declan had done to me, what I was planning to do to him, and I told her about the forgery scandal. I know who made that painting, I said. I recognized the technique when you showed it to me. Hans Reinhardt, working out of a studio in Amsterdam. I didn't say anything because I was young and scared and didn't want to get involved. Elena's expression was unreadable. You knew. I knew, I'm sorry. But Elena, I can prove it now. I can clear your name if you help me destroy Declan. She stared at her coffee for a long time. What do you need, Gerald Marsh, Veritech's CEO? You worked with his daughter on that Tech Meets Art exhibit 2 years ago. I need an introduction. Charlotte, Elena said slowly. What you're planning? It's dangerous. If Declan finds out he already destroyed me, Elena, I have nothing left to lose. That wasn't quite true. I still had my mother, and Ruth was getting worse. I'd noticed it during my first few days in Boston. The way she'd repeat stories she'd told me an hour before, the confusion about what day it was, the pills organized in containers labeled with days of the week, some taken, some not. Mom, I finally said, how long have you been having memory problems? She looked at me with such sadness. About 8 months, early stage dementia. The doctor thinks some days are better than others. Why didn't you tell me? Because you had enough to deal with. Charlie Bear. And because on my bad days, I forget to tell you. And on my good days, I don't want to admit it's happening. We held each other in that bright kitchen. Time was running out in more ways than one, but Ruth had her lucid moments. And in those moments, she was still the fierce woman who'd raised me. Use the money, she said. All of it if you need to. Blood money should do some good before I forget what money even is. Marcus moved fast. Within 2 weeks, we had acquired 28% of Veritech Industries through our network of shell companies. The stock price barely moved. No one noticed. Elena made the introduction. Gerald Marsh agreed to meet me at a gallery opening in San Francisco. Marsh was 72, silver-haired, with the careful movements of someone who'd survived multiple corporate wars. He studied me over champagne, trying to figure out my angle. Dr. Cortez speaks highly of you, he said. Though she mentioned you're married to Declan Westbrook. Separated, I said. And I'm here because I know he's trying to acquire your company. He wants your patents. Plans to gut your research team and fold the valuable pieces into Nexus AI. Marsh's expression hardened. You have proof. I have 6 months of emails between Declan and his board discussing exactly that strategy. I can get them to you. Why would you betray your husband? Because he's not my husband anymore. He's the man who spent 5 years making me feel worthless. And because my father was an engineer, Mr. Marsh, he would have hated seeing good technology destroyed for corporate profit. That was a lie. My father left when I was 6, and I had no idea what he would have thought about anything. But it was the right thing to say. Marsh studied me for a long moment. What do you want, Mrs. Westbrook? Ms. Brennan, I corrected. I want to help you keep your company independent, and I want Declan to lose the one thing he wants most. That's revenge. No, I said. Revenge is emotional. This is strategy. Marsh smiled. You know, I always did hate Declan Westbrook. He called my life's work a commodity asset in a trade publication. So tell me, Ms. Brennan, what's your plan? Over the next month, everything fell into place. We acquired another 12% of Veritex stock. Elena delivered proof about the forgery, clearing her name. Marcus stayed sober, attending meetings twice a day, and I transformed. Lost the expensive highlights, let my hair return to its natural auburn, stopped wearing the clothes Declan had chosen, started sleeping more than 4 hours a night. I felt like Charlotte Brennan again, like someone who mattered. We were at 40% ownership, just 11% more, and we'd control Veritex's board. I let myself imagine victory. Imagine Declan's face when he realized what I'd done. Imagine standing in front of him as an equal for the first time in 5 years. I was so focused on the future, I didn't see the trap closing around me. The blind item appeared in Harper Montgomery's Society column on a Tuesday morning. Harper was a gossip journalist who'd built an empire destroying reputations with carefully worded innuendo. Which tech wife is playing venture capitalists with mysterious money sources, say someone's been buying up shares in a hot data company? Husband might want to check the bank statements. My phone rang 30 seconds after I read it. Marcus, his voice tight. Charlie, this is bad. If people start digging, our shell companies are clean, I said, fighting down panic. You said they couldn't be traced back to me. They can't. But if Declan's lawyers start looking at Veritex's ownership structure, they might notice the buying pattern. Same strategy he's using, just faster. So we move faster. How close are we at 42%? But the remaining shares are harder to acquire. Long-time holders, loyal to Marsh. We're running out of easy targets. Then we pivot. Elena, can you arrange another meeting with Marsh? We need him to introduce us to those shareholders directly. Elena's voice on the conference call was hesitant. Charlie, I need to tell you something. Declan's lawyers contacted me yesterday. The world tilted. What? They know about the forgery scandal. They're threatening to press charges unless I tell them who I'm working with. Elena, the statute of limitations. They'll make it public again. Destroy what little reputation I've rebuilt. Charlie, I have kids. I can't go to prison. I can't lose everything. Marcus cut in. Elena, if you tell them, I'm not going to tell them, Elena said, but her voice shook. I just need you both to know. Declan's coming for us. I should have seen it then. Should have realized we'd been too successful. Moved too fast. Should have known Declan Westbrook didn't lose without fighting back. But I was so close. 42%. 9 more percent in Veritech was mine. So I pushed forward. We scheduled a meeting with Gerald Marsh's daughter, Emma, who held 5% of the company through a trust. Elena set it up, assuring me Emma was sympathetic to our position. The meeting was at a coffee shop in Palo Alto, 5 minutes from the penthouse where I lived with Declan. I hadn't been back to Silicon Valley in over a month. Emma Marsh was 34, a software engineer with her father's sharp eyes. We talked about Veritech's future, about protecting her father's legacy from corporate raiders. I want what's best for the company, Emma said, but I need to understand who you are. Charlotte, why you're really doing this. I told her, not the edited version, but the truth, about Declan's cruelty, about finding the group chat, about project replacement, about wanting to prove I was more than a decoration. Mom listened carefully. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. My father mentioned you have shell companies buying Veritech stock through Orion Holdings and Cascade Investments, among others. That's smart corporate strategy. But Charlotte, do you know who else has been buying Veritech stock through shell companies? Declan, so that's why we're trying to block him. No, Emma pulled out her phone, showed me a document. That's why he's been buying through different shells, ones that mirror your buying pattern almost exactly. I stared at the screen, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. Emma, what are you saying? I'm saying someone's been feeding Declan information about your purchases. He's been matching you block for block, dollar for dollar. You think you have 42%, but according to this SEC filing from this morning, Declan controls 51%. The coffee shop disappeared. The world narrowed to that one number, 51%. He'd beaten me. While I thought I was winning, he'd been 10 steps ahead. How? I whispered. Our shell companies were anonymous. No one could have traced them. Emma looked uncomfortable. Charlotte, I'm sorry, but you should know. The person who approached my father about selling his shares to Declan was Brooks Ashford, Nexus AI's COO. He told my father everything about your plan. Brooks Ashford, Declan's childhood friend, the man I'd met at dozens of dinner parties, who'd always been kind to me in that careful way people are kind to their friend's neglected wife. He'd been the leak from the beginning. I barely remember leaving the coffee shop. Barely remember Marcus finding me sitting in my rental car, staring at nothing. Charlie, talk to me. He knew, I said. My voice sounded far away. Declan knew everything, from the start. He let me think I was winning. Let me spend Ruth's money. Let me believe I could beat him. We don't know that for sure. Yes, we do. I showed Marcus the SEC filing, watched his face go gray. Jesus Christ. My phone rang. Declan's name on the screen. I answered on speaker. Hello, Charlotte? His voice was warm, amused. The way you talk to a child who'd done something adorably foolish. I heard you had coffee with Emma Marsh. Beautiful day for it. You've been watching me. I've been protecting my interests. Did you really think I wouldn't notice my wife liquidating assets and playing stock market games, Charlie? I have people who monitor every financial move in this industry. The moment your shell companies started buying Veritech, I knew. Then why let me keep going? Because you needed to learn a lesson. The warmth was gone now. Cold steel underneath. You needed to understand that you're nothing without me. That cute little act of rebellion, it was never going to work. You're not smart enough. You're not ruthless enough. You're just a museum girl who married above her station. My hands were shaking. You had Brooks spy on me. Brooks is loyal to Nexus AI. His entire family's wealth is tied to this company's success. When I told him you were trying to sabotage our acquisition, he made the obvious choice, just like Elena will, just like everyone will. Because at the end of the day, Charlotte, people choose power over sentiment. Why are you doing this? Because I can. Simple as that. Because you were supposed to be grateful for the life I gave you. Instead, you decided to embarrass me. That requires a response. The divorce. Will proceed on my terms. Your little stock manipulation attempt. My lawyers are calling it marital property theft since you used connections and information gained during our marriage. The prenup is ironclad. You'll get nothing. And Charlotte, I've made sure everyone knows you're unstable, erratic, possibly mentally ill. No museum will ever hire you again. You'll be exactly what you were always meant to be. Nobody. He hung up. I sat in that car, Marcus beside me, and felt something break inside me that had been barely holding together. Charlie. He's right, I said. I was stupid to think I could beat him. That's not true. He destroyed me, Marcus, and he did it by letting me think I had a chance. The real devastation came in stages over the next week. First, the Veritech board meeting. I attended using my 42%, trying to block the acquisition. Declan showed up with he does 51% and a smile like a wolf. He made me sit through the entire 3-hour meeting, made me watch as he took control of the company. At the end, he leaned over and whispered, "You really thought you could beat me? You're nothing without my name." Second, the media assault. Articles appeared in every major publication. TechCrunch ran a piece titled "The Unraveling of Charlotte Brennan." Anonymous sources, probably Brooks, described my erratic behavior, my obsession with destroying Declan's business, my mental instability. Harper Montgomery's column was the worst. She had photos, somehow, of me looking disheveled outside Ruth's apartment building. The headline read, "The Fall of Charlotte Brennan from Museum Darling to Desperate Housewife." My phone filled with messages. Old friends from SF MoMA, carefully distancing themselves. Colleagues I'd once respected, expressing concern for my mental health. No one took my side. No one believed me. Sloan posted on Instagram a photo of her and Declan at a charity event, him in a tuxedo, her in diamonds. The caption, standing strong with extraordinary people during difficult times. Everyone knew what that meant. I was the difficult time. Third, Ruth collapsed. I got the call at 2 in the morning. She'd had a stroke. The dementia had masked the warning signs. By the time a neighbor found her, it had been hours. I stood in the ICU at Mass General, watching machines breathe for my mother. The doctor was kind but clear. The damage was severe. She might have weeks. She might have months. But she wouldn't recover. All the blood money, the $2.7 million that was supposed to save me, was now going to medical bills. Medicare covered some of it, but not enough. Not nearly enough. Marcus found me in the hospital cafeteria at dawn, staring at bad coffee. "Charlie, there's something else." Of course there was. Declan's suing the shell companies for fraud. If he wins, you could face criminal charges. Let him. I don't care anymore. "Charlie, I'm done, Marcus. He won. He beat me at everything. My career is destroyed. My mother is dying. I have no money left. No friends. No future." I looked at him. He was right. I was nothing without him. Marcus sat down across from me, looked at me hard. "Is that really what you think, that you're nothing? Look at the evidence." "I am looking at the evidence. You took $2.7 million and turned it into a sophisticated corporate takeover attempt. You recruited allies. You executed a complex strategy. You got within 9% of controlling a major tech company. You did all of that while your husband's entire team was working against you, Charlie. You didn't fail. You just fought someone with unlimited resources and decades of experience. The fact that you got this close is remarkable. It doesn't feel remarkable. It feels like I destroyed my mother's legacy for nothing." "Then don't let it be for nothing." Marcus leaned forward. "You said Declan's suing for fraud. His lawyers will need to prove the shell companies committed actual fraud. That means discovery. That means they'll have to open their own books. Charlie, what if we fought back? With what I have nothing left. You have me, you have Elena, and I bet you have Gerald Marsh, who's probably furious that Declan strong-armed his daughter." I shook my head. "Elena's terrified of the forgery charges. She won't help." "Well, are you sure? Because from where I'm sitting, Elena Cortez owes you. You gave her evidence to clear her name. She folded under pressure. People feel guilty about that kind of thing. It doesn't matter. Declan controls Veritech. He won." Marcus pulled out his phone, showed me an email that had come in during the night. It was from Gerald Marsh. Subject, "We need to talk." I stared at that subject line for a long time. There was a cliff in front of me. I could step back, accept defeat, fade into nothing. Or I could jump. Gerald Marsh met me at a dive bar in Cambridge, the kind of place where tech billionaires didn't go, where conversations could happen without cameras or witnesses. He looked older than when I'd seen him at the gallery opening. Tired, angry. "Your husband threatened my daughter," he said without preamble. "Told her if she didn't sell her shares, he'd destroy her software company. Spread rumors about security vulnerabilities. Tanker investors. He made it very clear that crossing Declan Westbrook comes with consequences." "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry, be useful." Marsh pushed a small device across the table. A digital recorder. I recorded everything. Every threat, every illegal promise, every piece of leverage he tried to use. I've been in this business 40 years. Ms. Brennan, I know sharks, and I know how to protect myself from them. My heart started beating faster. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because I'm a vindictive old bastard who doesn't like being threatened. Because Emma is my daughter and no one touches my family. And because I saw something in you that night at the gallery. You reminded me of my late wife. She was quiet too, until someone pushed too far. Then she was unstoppable." I picked up the recorder. "What's on this?" "Everything you need to destroy Declan Westbrook. Insider trading, market manipulation, bribery, extortion. He got sloppy because he thought he was invincible. Men like that always do. If this comes out, you'll be dragged into the investigation." "Good. I'll testify. I'll bring Emma to testify. I'll hire the best lawyers in the country, and I'll make sure Declan Westbrook learns that some people can't be bought or intimidated. I stared at the recorder, hardly daring to believe it. There's something else, Marsh said. The acquisition isn't final yet. Board vote is scheduled for 3 weeks from now. Declan controls 51%, but he needs board approval for the merger terms. If you can create enough chaos before that vote, if you can expose him publicly enough, the board might refuse to approve. Tech companies are here sensitive to scandal. Bad press kills stock prices. But he controls the board. He controls the majority shares. But the board members are individuals with reputations to protect. If Declan becomes toxic enough, they'll turn on him to save themselves. It's what we do in this industry. Eat our own to survive. Marcus had been sitting quietly, listening. Now he spoke up. When's the board meeting? 3 weeks from today. At Nexus AI headquarters, Declan's planning to announce the Veritech acquisition at the Fairmont Grand Ballroom charity gala the night before. Big celebration. Major press coverage. He wants to look like a conquering hero. I felt something shift inside me. The numbness cracking. Something harder underneath. What if we made his celebration into a funeral? Marsh smiled, and it wasn't kind. Then I'd say you're finally learning how to play this game. The next morning I called Elena. She answered on the 5th ring, voice wary. Charlie, I can't. Elena, I have proof that clears your name. DNA evidence that traces the forgery to Hans Reinhardt. Police reports from Amsterdam. Everything you need. I was going to give it to you after we won. But we didn't win, so I'm giving it to you now. Silence, then quietly, why? Because you were my mentor. Because you deserved better than what happened. And because I need you to know that I don't blame you for protecting yourself. Declan weaponizes fear. It's what he does. Charlie, I also need you to know something else. Declan didn't just threaten you. He's been systematically threatening everyone around me. Marcus, Gerald Marsh, Emma Marsh. He's building a wall of fear, and the only way to break through fear is truth. What are you asking me to do? I'm not asking anything, but if you want to help, I'm meeting with a lawyer tomorrow. Patricia Gorman. She specializes in taking down powerful men who think they're untouchable. We're going to use Gerald Marsh's recordings to file criminal complaints with the SEC. And Elena, if we do this right, we'll destroy Declan before he can destroy anyone else. Another long silence. Then what time is the meeting? I met Patricia Gorman at her office in downtown Boston. She was 63, silver-haired, with the calm demeanor of someone who'd seen every dirty trick in the divorce playbook. I know who Declan Westbrook is, Patricia said after I explained the situation. I know his type, rich men who think marriage is ownership, who gaslight their wives into believing they're crazy. I've taken down dozens of them. Can you take down someone with his resources? Honey, I've taken down senators and CEOs and men worth 10 times what Declan's worth. The trick isn't having more money than them. It's having more truth. She reviewed Gerald Marsh's recordings, made notes, asked questions, finally looked up. This is good, really good. Insider trading, market manipulation, extortion. The SEC will investigate. But Charlie, you need to understand something. This will get ugly. Declan will fight back. He'll try to destroy your credibility, your mental health narrative, everything. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Ruth, unconscious in a hospital bed, about 5 years of being erased, about project replacement and the cruelty of being systematically dismantled. I'm prepared. Good, because we're going to hit him from every angle. Criminal charges, civil suits, press exposure. We're going to make him radioactive, and we're going to do it at his victory party. Elena showed up then, looking uncertain but determined. Behind her was someone I didn't expect. Brooks Ashford. Before anyone throws anything, Brooks said quickly, I need to explain. I stood up, furious. You betrayed everything. You told Declan about the shell companies. I told Declan what he already knew. Brooks looked exhausted. Charlie, Declan had forensic accountants tracking every stock purchase in Veritech from the moment he decided to acquire them. He knew about your shell companies within a week. He didn't need me to tell him. And then why did you? Because he told me if I didn't spy on you, he'd expose my father's embezzlement. My father is 71 years old, Titu. He'd die in prison. So I gave Declan information he already had and prayed you'd somehow win anyway. Your prayers didn't work. No, they didn't. But Charlie, I've been documenting everything. Every illegal order Declan gave me. Every time he told me to lie to investors or manipulate board meetings or hide financial problems, I have 5 years of evidence, and I'm prepared to testify against him. Patricia Gorman's eyes lit up. Now we're talking. A former COO turning state's evidence. That's powerful. Why now? I asked Brooks. Why turn on him now? Because Emma Marsh is a friend of mine. And when Declan threatened her, when I saw how far he was willing to go, I realized I'd been enabling a monster. My father's sins are his own. I can't protect him anymore. But maybe I can stop Declan from destroying anyone else. I looked at Brooks for a long moment, saw genuine guilt in his eyes, genuine fear. If we do this, I said, Declan will destroy you. He was always going to destroy me. Charlie, men like Declan destroy everyone eventually. At least this way I get to choose how I fall. Over the next 2 weeks, we built our case. Patricia filed complaints with the SEC, detailed and devastating. Harper Montgomery, smelling a bigger story, started digging into Nexus AI's finances. Marcus reconstructed money trails. Elena provided testimony about the intimidation tactics. And Brooks gave us everything. Emails, recordings, board meeting minutes that showed a pattern of fraud going back years. Ruth woke up for 2 days. Lucid moments that felt like a gift. Are you going to get him? She asked, her hand weak in mine. Yeah, Ma. We're going to get him. Good, she smiled. Brennan women don't quit. She slipped back into unconsciousness that night. The doctor said it wouldn't be long. I sat beside her bed and made a promise. When this was over, when Declan was destroyed, I'd come back. I'd sit with her until the end. But first, I had to finish this. The night before the gala, I went shopping. Not at the expensive boutiques where I'd bought clothes for 5 years. At a small store in the North End where I'd shopped before Declan. I found a simple black dress. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that screamed revenge or victory. Just a well-made dress that fit me properly. That felt like mine. At home. I looked through my jewelry, passed over the sapphires and diamonds Declan had bought me, found a pair of simple pearl earrings. They'd been Ruth's. Marcus drove me to San Francisco. We didn't talk much. There wasn't much to say. At a stoplight in Oakland, he asked, "Are you scared? Terrified?" Good. Fear means you understand the stakes. We pulled up to the Fairmont at 7:30. The gala started at 8. Press everywhere. Cameras flashing. I got out of the car in my simple black dress. No dramatic entrance. No red carpet moment. Just Charlotte Brennan, walking into the fight of her life. The Fairmont Grand Ballroom was a cathedral of wealth. Crystal chandeliers throwing light across 1,000 expensive outfits. San Francisco's elite in their natural habitat. Champagne in hand, discussing deals worth billions with the casual ease of people discussing weather. I'd been to dozens of events like this as Mrs. Declan Westbrook. Always on his arm, smiling, decorative. Tonight I walked in alone. The whispers started immediately. I felt them like insects crawling across my skin. Is that Charlotte Westbrook? I heard she had a breakdown. Poor thing. Divorce is always hardest on the wife. I kept my head up, kept walking, found my assigned table near the back. Not the head table where I'd sat for 5 years. They'd relegated me to the cheap seats, expecting I wouldn't show. Marcus was already there, uncomfortable in a rented tux. Patricia Gorman sat beside him in a sharp navy suit. Elena arrived a few minutes later, looking pale but determined. Everyone's in position, Patricia said quietly. Harper Montgomery is here with her photographer. Brooks is backstage with the AV team. We're ready. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Charlie, Patricia put a hand on my arm. You don't have to do this. We can file the charges quietly. Let the SEC investigation play out. You don't have to confront him publicly. Yes, I do. I met her eyes. Because he destroyed me publicly. Because he made sure everyone thought I was crazy. Unstable? Nothing. I need them to see who he really is. Okay then. Patricia squeezed my arm. Let's burn this place down. The lights dimmed. Declan took the stage. He looked perfect. Tailored tuxedo, confident smile, complete ease in front of hundreds of people. This was his world, his kingdom. Sloane stood to the side of the stage, stunning in a silver gown, playing her role as the supportive executive, the woman who'd soon replace me entirely. "Good evening," Declan said, his voice carrying through the ballroom. "Thank you all for being here tonight, for supporting the Westbrook Foundation and its mission to advance technological innovation." Applause. Warm, genuine applause. They loved him. "Tonight is special," and he continued, "because tonight we announce the completion of Nexus AI's acquisition of Veritech Industries. This merger represents a quantum leap forward in data verification technology. Together, we'll revolutionize how information is authenticated in the digital age." More applause. Wow. I watched him bask in it, watched him stand in that spotlight. Untouchable. "I want to thank Gerald Marsh for his vision in building Veritech. And I want to thank my incredible team at Nexus AI, particularly Brooks Ashford and Sloan Harrington, whose dedication made this possible." Brooks, standing in the shadows near the stage, caught my eye, gave a small nod. "Now," Harper Montgomery stood up from her table. "Mr. Westbrook, I have a question about the timeline of your Veritech negotiations." Heads turned. This wasn't how galas worked. You didn't interrupt the keynote speaker. Declan's smile didn't waver. "I'm happy to answer questions after the presentation." "Harper, this can't wait." Harper pulled out her phone, reading from notes. "Can you explain why you threatened Emma Marsh with professional retaliation if she didn't sell her Veritech shares? Or why you bribed board members to support your acquisition? Or why you engaged in systematic insider trading to manipulate Veritech's stock price?" The room erupted in confused murmuring. Declan's smile finally cracked. "That's an absurd accusation." "I have recordings," Harper said calmly. "Would you like me to play them?" "Harper, I don't know what you think you have, but—" The ballroom speakers crackled to life. Gerald Marsh's voice, crystal clear. "Mr. Westbrook, I'm not comfortable with these terms." Then Declan's voice, "You don't have to be comfortable. Gerald, you just have to be smart. Sign the deal, or I'll make sure every investor in Silicon Valley knows your company has security vulnerabilities. Your stock will tank. Your career will end. Your daughter's startup will never get funded. Are we clear?" Silence, absolute, devastating silence. Declan stood frozen on the stage, his perfect facade cracking. That's taken out of context. But Brooks was already walking toward the storms carrying a laptop. He connected it to the presentation screen. "For 5 years," Brooks said, his voice shaking slightly, "I followed illegal orders. I lied to investors. I manipulated board votes. I helped Declan Westbrook commit fraud because I was afraid. But Emma Marsh is my friend. And when he threatened her, I realized I couldn't do this anymore." The screen filled with documents, emails, financial statements, all showing a pattern of systematic fraud. Patricia Gorman stood. "My name is Patricia Gorman. I'm an attorney representing several individuals who've been threatened or manipulated by Mr. Westbrook. I've filed formal complaints with the SEC regarding insider trading, market manipulation, and extortion. Federal investigators are reviewing the evidence now." Phones came out, cameras. Reporters who'd been here for a puff piece about a charity gala suddenly had a real story. Declan's face went through several emotions: shock, anger, calculation. He tried to recover. "This is clearly a coordinated attack by my estranged wife." I stood up. Every eye in the ballroom turned to me, the woman who'd been broken, humiliated, erased, standing in a simple black dress with my mother's pearls. "You're right," I said, my voice carrying. "This is coordinated, because you taught me how to be strategic. Declan, you spent 5 years showing me that power matters more than truth, that ruthlessness wins, that people who show weakness deserve to be crushed." I walked toward the stage. People moved aside. "You called me nothing. You told me I was an embarrassment, a ghost, a woman with no personality, no intelligence, no worth beyond what you gave me." I reached the stage, looked up at him. "You were wrong." I pulled out a document from my clutch. The divorce papers, final version. The prenup you made me sign says I get nothing if I damage your business interests. But Declan, I didn't damage them. I exposed crimes. That's not breach of contract. That's civic duty. Patricia Gorman joined me. My client is filing for divorce on grounds of emotional abuse, fraud, and constructive abandonment. We're also filing civil suits for the damages caused by your campaign to destroy her reputation. The recordings Mr. Marsh provided include evidence of project replacement, your systematic plan to psychologically break Charlotte so she'd accept a pittance in the divorce settlement. I handed the papers to Declan. His hand shook as he took them. You get nothing, I said quietly. The court will award me half of everything acquired during our marriage. Your stock in Nexus AI, the penthouse, the cars, all of it, because you committed fraud throughout our marriage and used marital assets to do it. Everything you built is tainted, and I'm taking my half. Around us, cameras flashed, phones recorded. This moment would be everywhere by morning. Declan looked at me with something I'd never seen before. Not anger, not arrogance, fear. You'll never survive this, he said, voice low. Even if you win, even if you take everything, you'll always be the woman who destroyed her husband. No one will ever hire you. No one will ever trust you. You're still nothing without me. I smiled. It felt good. No, Declan, I was somebody before you. I had a career, a passion, a self. You convinced me I was nothing so you could feel like everything. But I'm not nothing. I never was. You're the one who's nothing without the lie. Security appeared, not to remove me, to escort Declan. Because SEC agents had just entered the ballroom, Patricia had timed it perfectly. Mr. Westbrook, we need you to come with us. We have questions regarding your financial activities. It wasn't an arrest. Not yet. But it would be. I watched them lead him away. Watched Sloane disappear into the crowd, already distancing herself. Watched the ballroom erupt into chaos. Then I turned and walked out. Not running, not hiding, just leaving. Because I was done with that life. Done with those people. Done with being Mrs. Declan Westbrook. Outside, Marcus was waiting by the car. Elena stood with him, crying quietly. You did it, Marcus said. We did it. Patricia emerged from the ballroom. The press wants statements. The board is demanding meetings. This is going to be massive. Charlie? I know, but tonight I need to go see my mother. I drove back to Boston through the night. Marcus beside me. Both of us silent. Ruth was in the same ICU room. Machines still breathing for her. I took her hand. We got him, Ma. We got him. Her eyes didn't open, but I thought maybe. Her fingers squeezed mine. Just a little. I'm going to stay here with you now, however long it takes. We're going to do this together. I stayed with Ruth for 6 days. Patricia handled the press. Marcus dealt with lawyers. Elena coordinated with the museum about potential job offers. On the 6th day, Ruth opened her eyes. Clear, lucid. Did you win, she asked. Yeah, Ma. We won. Good, she smiled. I'm proud of you, Charlie Bear. I love you. Love you too, baby. So much. Her eyes closed. The machines made the sounds machines make, and I held her hand while Ruth Brennan, the fiercest woman I'd ever known, slipped away. She'd waited, held on just long enough to know I'd be okay. The funeral was small. Marcus, Elena, a few of Ruth's nursing friends. We buried her in the same cemetery as her parents, under oak trees that had been there 100 years. I stood at the grave after everyone left and made a promise. I'm going to build something good with this, Ma. I'm going to take everything we did, all the pain and the fighting, and I'm going to make something beautiful. I promise. The wind rustled the oak leaves, and I thought Ruth would have liked that. The first week after Ruth's funeral, I slept 14 hours a day, grief and exhaustion finally catching up now that the fight was over. Patricia's legal team handled everything. I signed documents, made statements to investigators, watched from a distance as Declan's empire crumbled. Nexus AI's stock dropped 43% in 5 days. The board forced Declan to resign as CEO. Brooks Ashford testified before the SEC, detailing years of fraud. Criminal charges were filed. Sloane Harrington disappeared from social media. Her memoir deal fell through. The influencer who tried to become a billionaire's wife ended up unemployed and toxic. The divorce settlement was still being negotiated, but Patricia was confident. He'll give you everything rather than face a public trial. Men like Declan can't stand having their egos dissected in court. But none of it felt like victory. It just felt like aftermath. I was sitting in Ruth's apartment, going through her things, when Elena called. Charlie, SF MoMA wants to meet with you. The director personally. They want to offer you a position. I don't want pity. It's not pity. They saw what happened at the gala. Everyone did. You're not the unstable wife anymore. You're the woman who took down a billionaire by exposing his crimes. Museums love that narrative. Truth over power. Evidence over lies. It's what you were always good at. I thought about it. Thought about going back to the place where I'd felt most alive, where Charlotte Brennan had been somebody. Set up the meeting. 2 days later, I sat in the director's office overlooking the sculpture garden. Margaret Reeves was 60, sharp-eyed, with the kind of presence that commanded rooms. We made a mistake letting you go, Margaret said directly. You left because Declan Westbrook's world demanded a wife who didn't work. We should have fought harder to keep you. We didn't. I apologize. Thank you. Elena Cortez spoke very highly of you. So did Gerald Marsh. Interestingly, he called me personally to recommend you for our board of advisors. I was surprised. Gerald Marsh called you. He said, and I quote, Charlotte Brennan has more strategic intelligence than half the MBAs in Silicon Valley and more integrity than all of them combined. If you don't hire her, you're an idiot. Gerald doesn't mince words. I almost smiled. No, he doesn't. We'd like to offer you Director of Acquisitions. You'd oversee all major purchases, coordinate with donors, build relationships with artists and collectors. It's a significant role, high profile. And Charlie, we'd like you to start an initiative, a program for emerging artists, funded by your settlement from the divorce. My settlement isn't final yet. When it is, think about it. You could create something meaningful. Take money that came from a destructive relationship and turn it into something that builds careers, supports art, creates beauty. Ruth Brennan Memorial Fund for Emerging Artists. My throat tightened. That's a good name. Is that a yes? I looked out at the sculpture garden. Remembered walking through these galleries 5 years ago. Alive and passionate. Remembered the woman I'd been before Declan. Yes, that's a yes. The settlement came through 6 weeks later, $47 million. Half of everything Declan had accumulated during our marriage, minus legal fees. Patricia called me with the news. He signed everything, didn't even negotiate. I think he just wanted it over. Is he going to prison? The SEC case is strong, probably 3 to 5 years, with good behavior. His lawyers are already working on a plea deal. And Brooks, immunity for cooperation. He lost everything at Nexus, but he won't face charges. Elena's forgery case was officially closed, records expunged. And Charlie, there's something else. Gerald Marsh wants to meet with you. We met at the same dive bar in Cambridge. Gerald looked better this time, less exhausted, almost pleased. The Veritech board asked me to stay on as CEO. He said, they decided integrity matters more than Declan's money. We're going independent, rebuilding. It'll take time, but we'll survive. I'm glad. Charlie, I owe you an apology. When Declan threatened Emma, I sold out. I let fear make me weak. You didn't, even when you'd lost everything. You fought back. That took courage I didn't have. You gave me the recordings. You made this possible. After the damage was done, he slid an envelope across the table. This is the stock you purchased. 42% of Veritech Industries. It's yours. I wanted you to have it from the beginning. I stared at the envelope. Gerald, this is worth millions. $38 million at current valuation. Consider it payment for saving my company from a predator. And Charlie, I'd like you on Veritech's board of directors. We could use someone with your strategic mind. Someone who understands that building matters more than destroying. I opened the envelope, looked at the stock certificates, thought about what Ruth would say. I accept. On one condition, 10% of my shares go into a trust for Emma. She shouldn't have been threatened because of me. Gerald's eyes got suspiciously bright. She'll appreciate that. Thank you. No, Gerald, thank you. 6 months later, I stood in SF MoMA's newest gallery, the Ruth Brennan Memorial Gallery for Emerging Artists. 20 pieces from young artists who'd never shown in a major museum before. Sculptures, paintings, multimedia installations. All raw talent and fierce vision. The opening was crowded. Art students, collectors, critics. Elena stood by the entrance, greeting guests. Marcus was there with his girlfriend, a social worker he'd met at AA meetings. Patricia Gorman came with her wife, both of them looking elegant and formidable. Gerald Marsh arrived with Emma. We'd worked together on Veritech's board for 4 months now, building something stable and ethical. Emma and I had become friends. Harper Montgomery was there too. She'd written a long piece for Vanity Fair about the fall of Declan Westbrook. It was fair, thorough, and devastating. Her career had never been better. Charlotte Brennan, a voice behind me. I turned, a young woman, maybe 25, holding a champagne glass nervously. I'm Sophie Grant. The mixed media piece by the stairs is mine. The one with the reclaimed circuit boards, it's stunning. Sophie's face lit up. Really, I was terrified you'd think it was too derivative or, it's honest, I said. It's about transformation, taking something that was broken and making it into something new. That's not derivative. That's necessary. We talked about her process, her influences, her hopes. I remembered being that young, that uncertain, that hungry for validation. When Sophie left to talk to a potential buyer, Elena joined me. You're good at this, Elena said. You always were. I forgot for a while, but you remembered. She gestured at the gallery. This is what winning looks like. Charlie, not destroying Declan. This, building something that matters. I looked around the gallery, at art being celebrated, at young artists being seen, at a space dedicated to my mother's memory, funded by money that had been meant to keep me silent. Yeah, I said. This is winning. That night, after everyone left, I walked through the gallery alone, stopped in front of a small plaque, the Ruth Brennan Memorial Gallery for Emerging Artists, dedicated to the woman who taught her daughter that blood money can do good in the right hands. Brennan women don't quit. I thought about Ruth, about her sacrifice, her strength, her fierce love, about how she'd kept blood money for years, waiting for the day I'd need it. I thought about Declan, serving his sentence in a minimum security prison in Pennsylvania, about how he'd lost everything by trying to take everything. I thought about myself, about the ghost in the glass palace who'd learned to haunt back. My phone buzzed, a text from Marcus Drinks to celebrate first rounds on me. I smiled. Meet you in 20, walking out of the museum. I caught my reflection in the glass doors. Charlotte Brennan in a simple black dress, my mother's pearls, no longer decorative, no longer erased, just myself. Finally, the night Ruth had died. She'd asked if we'd won. I'd said yes because that's what she needed to hear. But the truth was more complicated. We hadn't won or lost. We'd survived. We'd fought back. We'd refused to disappear. And we'd built something beautiful from the wreckage. That's not revenge. That's resurrection. And resurrection, I'd learned, is the best victory of all.